Welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. This is episode 89. Alongside Don Helbig, I'm Ryan Sir. Don, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. How about you?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, the parks are opening up. It's spring. It was warm today. I wore shorts when I walked the dog. What do we got going on today?
Well, I'm excited about today's guest. He's been around the industry for a long time, and I'd like to welcome Dave Hahner. Dave, how you doing?
Apologize. We had a severe thunderstorm alert just come across the phones.
Well, we couldn't hear it, but do whatever you need to do to stay safe. We actually had storms roll through here like this morning, so I wonder if they were the same ones. But Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing well until I heard that. So,
all right,
Yeah.
don't get too paranoid. The storms weren't that bad here, you know. But so you're the Ace historian, but you're also like a Kennywood historian unofficially, and Kennywood has a rich history. Can you talk about your involvement with the park?
Yeah, I worked there back when I was in high school and in college. I worked there from 79 to 83. I worked in the refreshment department, actually. And it was there that I learned about ACE. The National Convention was there in 1980, CoasterCon 3. And I watched all these crazies climbing on top of the Thunderbolt while the coaster was in operation. And I'm just like, oh, my God, what are they doing? It's like, it was amazing. I even got to see Zonker the Wonder Dog riding the coaster. So I believe I talked with Clarence Heinz, who was the, I guess he was the membership coordinator at the time. And he gave me how to apply and join ACE on a napkin. He wrote it down for me. So I became a member instantly. And I've been a member now for 44 years. So, but my grandfather worked at the park when I was a child, and he worked on Noah's Ark, and that was a great thing. We got to a lot of the perks of having an employee as a relative. He would bring home lots of free tickets, and he used to take me into Noah's Ark and show me the back corridors and how everything worked when I was a child. It was so much fun. And that probably was what got me so interested in how everything works in the park. It just was, I was probably only like about 7 years old. In fact, I was afraid to go in Noah's Ark. It was a scary, dark place. And he turned all the lights on and walked me through the whole thing and showed me how everything worked, and was never scared again. So, and then, as I got older, got to ride the roller coasters and fell in love with the park, probably since as early as I can remember. I just absolutely loved the park. I only lived about 2 miles from the park, so we could hear and see the fireworks that they would have over the 4th of July and on Italian Day then. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my first visit to Kennywood was in 1982, and just a lot of charm there. It kind of took me back to my early childhood days, Cincinnati's Coney Island. But what do you think sets Kennywood apart from other amusement parks?
I think it's the mix of the old with the new. It's an old, even though they're now a corporate owned park, they were family owned up until 2007. They treated everybody like family at the park. I mean, but they never wanted to tear anything down if they didn't have to. And at first, if you would talk with some of the management, they would say, "Oh yeah, we want to be historically minded. We want to keep a lot of these old rides because our grandparents rode it and our great grandparents rode it and so on." But if you talked with Carl Hughes, who was then the the manager of the park at the time, he said, "No, the only reason we did it was because we were cheap. We were too cheap to rip anything out." And that's true. Probably in the 1950s and 60s, they didn't tear things down because it was cheaper to keep them. And as time wore on, and they started getting accolades for being so historically minded, in terms of like so many different old style attractions that you can't find anywhere anymore, including Noah's Ark. It's the last one of its kind operating in the world now, and they kind of stuck to it, and that became their new mantra, and they became a National Historic Landmark back in 1987, thanks to Carl Hughes.
So, besides the nostalgic factor, what do you think makes Kennywood unique and beloved for all the visitors that come every year?
Well, you guys are from Cincinnati. You're probably very similar, especially with Coney Island. It was always a tradition to go to Kennywood growing up, from the time that the park opened in 1899 up until, today even. People go to Kennywood because it's part of living in Pittsburgh. Pittsburghers went to Kennywood. That was their playground. Up until 1977, they had two playgrounds. They also had Westview Park on the north side of Pittsburgh, which ironically is where I live today. And I grew up near Kennywood, but now I live near Westview Park. But unfortunately, Westview is long gone. But they basically had a gentleman's agreement between them that Westview would take all the school picnics north of the city, and Kennywood would take all the picnics south of the city. And they stayed to that agreement until Westview closed, and then Kennywood then took over all the school picnics in the entire region. Then,
yeah, Kennywood opening its gates for its 126th season this weekend. They've introduced a new twist with a classic ride, following the most appealing new ride named Sweepstakes fan vote. The bumper cars are now known as Potato Smash, winning over names like Deep Fried Derby and Speedy Spuds. So what are your thoughts on the new name choice and this quirky theme?
Quirky is definitely a word to use. It was definitely unexpected when they announced it back in, I believe, December. And I would have never guessed that they were going to mash the bumper cars and the potato patch together. That just blew my mind when they did that. At first, I thought, "Oh my God, what are they thinking? That seems kind of silly." And the more I thought about it, but isn't an amusement park something about being silly and having fun? So, yeah, let's go with it. We'll go with Potato Smash. It'll definitely be something different, something unique, and it also screams Kennywood. The potato patch is a very beloved part of the park.
Yeah. So in 2023, one of the notable setbacks at Kennywood was the absence of the Turtle, a beloved ride undergoing extensive restoration starting in August. This classic attraction, dating back to 1927 and originally named the Tumblebug, is making a comeback this season with a reconstructed foundation at its center. Its return offers families another exciting option, bringing back the nostalgic spinning fun that was missed for the past 2 years. Can you talk about the Turtle and what your thoughts are on that ride?
Excuse me. I apologize. I'm getting over a cold myself. Mm-hmm. The Turtle has always been like a part of the park. I mean, it opened in 1927 as the Tumblebug, as you said, and it received its turtle themes, I believe, in 1946 or 47, and it's been as much a part of the park as the carousel, Noah's Ark, everything else that makes Kennywood Kennywood. And it is the last operating Tumblebug in the world. Adult-sized.
Adult-sized.
Yes, there are lots of little kitty Tumblebugs out there, but the Chambers Company. And I'm still got a lingering cough. Anyway, Turtle is totally been refurbished. They put a whole new center pylon in. They put they they fixed up the track. They redid the cars, redid some of the motors. It's going to be like riding a whole new ride, but yet it's still the same old turtle. And it's such a fun ride with the kids. Little kids and adults can ride together, and it just makes for a great family type of ride.
It's one of my favorites there. Now we hear there were some off-season updates to the Jackrabbit. This roller coaster debuted in 1920. Talk about that.
Jackrabbit gets updated every year. Nothing really too different than what they get most years. Now, one of the things they did talk about was the coaster train being rebuilt. I believe it was the green train this year. They do that every year. They'll take one of the cars and strip it down basically to its frame and put new wood on it, fix it up, reupholster it, and it's all done in-house by the Kennywood carpenters. And this is just standard operating procedure for them. This isn't like something new. They do this quite often, whether if it's every year or every other year. They're always constantly rebuilding those trains, which are they date back to 1950 when they were built by Edward Vettel of T.M. Harton fame, and also who built and designed the Blue Streak at Continental Lake Park, which we sadly lost a few years ago. And but they also built the coasters at Westview Park here in Pittsburgh, and so they it's nice to see Kennywood keep those old style trains, and they're pretty much the same as they were back in 1950, although they're missing the little propeller in the front. Other than that, though, they're pretty much the same trains, just with new wood, new upholstery. Same lap bar, though.
Yeah. So the racer got some extensive work done. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Again, it's more standard operating procedure with them. They replace sections of wood every year on all three of their coasters. Thunderbolt also received some new wood as well this year, and this is just how they keep the coasters in tip-top shape. They just like about every 7 to 10 years, they'll replace a section of track or a section of the structure. And so nothing is older than 10 years on those coasters in terms of the structure of the track. It's just kind of like a cyclical upkeep or maintenance of the rides. And they do a magnificent job. Again, all in-house. They don't bring in any outside group to do their track.
You got Kennywood's Jackrabbit, the Racer, Thunderbolt, 3 iconic wooden coasters. Each have been designated as an American Coaster Enthusiast Landmark. What makes these coasters so special and their enduring impact on the park's identity?
Well, their age, for one. I mean, the Jackrabbit is now, I believe, the second oldest coaster in North America, followed by the Jackrabbit at Seabreeze in Rochester, New York, because of Leap the Dip's currently being closed, although Leap the Dip's still being the oldest standing roller coaster in the world. Yeah, I mean, Jackrabbit is special because of its incredible double dip that John Miller built. He designed that coaster into a small ravine in the park, and in doing so, he built a double down dip that, to this day, I don't think has been equaled. It is one of the most magnificent moments of airtime bliss that you can ever find on a roller coaster, I feel. Then you also have the Racer, which is the oldest operating racing roller coaster in the world, and it's also one of only 2 continuous loop roller coasters where you switch sides of the track. The other one being at the Grand National at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. And then Thunderbolt, which actually dates back to 1924 and will actually be celebrating partly 100th anniversary this year. The Thunderbolt, the Pippin section of the Thunderbolt, which is the ravine, which was basically like a mirror image of the Jackrabbit in terms of its layout for the most part. And section is still in the as part of the ride, and that portion of the ride is 100 years old this year.
Incredible. So of the 3 Kennywood rides you just mentioned, which one's your favorite and why?
Oh, I love them all. All 3 of them have their own quirkiness or specialness to them. I would have to give the edge to the Thunderbolt only because it's an amazing ride. It's just an incredible experience, and was the first, I guess, recipient of the Best Coaster Top 10 award back in 1974 when Robert Cartmel wrote his article for the New York Times. And I think that was the very first top 10 roller coaster list that was ever created, and at least that was published. So Thunderbolt ended up being the king of the coasters that year.
Yeah, Thunderbolt of the 3 is my favorite too, and it's also one of those rides for me that's like 2 different experiences between the daytime, and then it just seems to take on a different vibe at night.
I would agree. Yeah, it definitely feels like it's rolling faster at night. I've heard debates between engineers as to whether or not that's true. I think there's a little bit of a truth to it because the grease becomes a little more viscous in the evenings, especially on a warm summer night. So I think, a little bit faster. So still a great ride.
Yeah, Kennywood also home to a really good steel coaster. Phantom's Revenge, rode that for the first time last year, and it really surprised me. I thought it was going to be good, but it was off the charts good. So give me your thoughts on that coaster.
Wow. Yeah, Phantom's Revenge. I was lucky enough to be invited to Media Day when it was the Steel Phantom back in 1991. And it was a giant aero looping coaster / hybrid or hyper coaster at the time. And, we never thought, I never thought that it would get any better. I mean, I thought the Steel Phantom was a fantastic ride when it first opened. And I was lucky enough to ride it 27 times on opening day and ended up getting vertigo from it and didn't realize what caused the problem. I actually went to the doctor and I was having like real severe dizziness. He goes, "Well, did you do anything unusual?" And of course I didn't mention riding Steel Phantom. I was like, "No, I don't think I did." "Oh, wait a minute. I rode the Steel Phantom like 27 times. And he just looked at me. He said, "Take a couple of these and it'll go away." Stay off the coaster. Steel Phantom was a great ride when it opened, but as with most aero looping coasters, they tended not to age well and became a little bit of a headbanger, we'll call it. And so that is why it was changed in 2000. They made an announcement that Steel Phantom would be closing at the end of the season. People were like just in awe and like, how dare you get rid of the Steel Phantom? It was a record-breaking roller coaster. It was considered one of the best roller coasters in the country. But as most of the Kennywood management would have told you at the time, it was losing ridership. And they were still using tickets back then as well as ride all day passes. So they were definitely seeing it with the downturn in attendance on the ride. And basically the reason being when they would survey people was it was too rough, or they were getting headaches on it, or whatever the case may be. So they brought in Morgan Manufacturing after they closed the ride on Labor Day in 2000. And they began the transformation of the ride into the Phantom's Revenge. And quite frankly, what was the Steel Phantom? The Phantom's Revenge is amazing. It's probably, it is definitely one of my favorite steel coasters in the country. It is one of my favorite hyper coasters in the country. And it offers just fantastic view of going down into the valley, but then you also have the tremendous airtime as it goes through its course. And it gets a lot of accolades and deservedly so. It's a magnificent ride, and Morgan did a fantastic job in reconfiguring Steel Phantom into the Phantom's Revenge.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't ridden Phantom's Revenge in quite a while, but that's still like a top 5 for me. It's just so good. so much airtime. So let's talk about Jeters, the iconic Kennywood mascot from the 1970s. He's the namesake of Kennywood's latest watering hole, their third for the over 21 crowd. Kennywood has teamed up with Penn Brewery for this exciting venture featuring 12 taps, pouring 8 different varieties of beer, including a mouth-watering strawberry funnel cake, shandy. It's the largest beer selection in a park that, believe it or not, went over a century without offering any beer at all. So tell us about the history of Jeters.
Jeters. Well, we can't talk about Jeters without talking about Kenny Kangaroo. Kenny came to the park in 50 years ago, in 1974. He was added to the park as a park mascot, and that was part of the trend of parks adding a mascot to the park. Now, they didn't have any IPs. There was no cartoons based on anything in the park. We had no tie-in with any studios or any sort. But what happened was Kennywood tended to borrow images, namely like Howdy Doody and Henry were well-known height markers for Kennywood attendees. And Howdy Doody, the 1950s marionette puppet show, was used in the park. They didn't get permission to use them, but Buffalo Bob was his name. He came in and he thought it was great. He goes, "Oh, that's free publicity." So he didn't mind having Howdy Doody in the park. But then in the 1970s, they figured, well, kids don't know who Howdy Doody is. We'll switch over to the Peanuts characters. So they put in Snoopy and Charlie Brown. That doesn't mean that they got permission to use Charlie Brown and Snoopy. So what happened was, it was just tradition for parks to borrow like IP characters, because most of the studios didn't care, because they figured that was free publicity for their characters. And that's why I guess it was in an issue of Life magazine, and that they were showing off Kennywood that year, and you could see the Snoopy height marker. And I guess somebody from either King World Features or the Schultz estate, or whether it was Charles Schultz himself, saw it, and they got a cease and desist letter from Schultz saying that they could no longer use the Peanuts characters. So they had to hurry up and take the signs down, and they replaced them with new characters. And one of them being Kenny Kangaroo, who they had already had in the park. But they decided to have friends of Kenny, and 2 of the characters that they had were Jeters, which is like a big pink Muppet-like character. It looks like he was from the country. And then there was Colonel Bimbo T. Fogwater, I believe his last name was. And they were original characters that were created for the park. And they used them as height markers at the park, as well as costume characters walking around the park. And Jeter's probably becoming second most famous of the costume characters, next to Kenny Kangaroo. And Jeter's probably disappeared back in the late 90s, early 2000s. More likely because his costume was starting to probably see some wear and tear. And so he was quietly retired, and they got new Kenny costumes in the meantime. And surprisingly, they did not get another Jeter's costume, and he just basically disappeared quietly. And they introduced Parker, who is a Kennywood Arrow, which also walks around the park. So this is why I think now Jeters is returning, and he's returning in a big way. He's getting his own tavern, which used to be a gift shop, and that was an arcade for one season. So,
yeah. So Johnny Rockets, it had a good run, but there's a new player in town at Kennywood's Merry-Go-Round Pavilion. So what's the scoop on the revamped eatery? It's a Carousel Burger Company, And as someone that's been around Kennywood as long as you have, a lot of history there. So how do you feel about this change up at one of Kennywood's classic spots?
Hey, as long as the burgers are good, you know.
Mhm.
I'm all for it. I mean, what they did to the Carousel Pavilion, some people didn't like the changes that they made. They made it an enclosed building, but it hadn't been a carousel since 1926. The new carousel, which is the current one that they bought in 1927, was too big for the building, so they had to build another building next to it, and that's why it's not in that building. That was the home for the original carousel that was built in 1899, and they had a second carousel that fit in that building, I believe, in the early 1900s, and then they wanted to replace it with the one that's currently there at the park now, and it didn't fit, so they turned it into what they call the soda fountain. Basically, they brought in like a snack bar, and it became that way, and just grew, and they kept expanding it over the years, and then when I was a kid, it was one side sold hamburgers, where the other side sold like pastries and ice cream sandwiches and things of that nature, and they made their own donuts there, which was kind of cool. I don't know all that they're going to possibly do this year, but I did hear that some of their old school items might be coming back as part of the menu in the park. I don't know all that they're going to have, but I do know they're going to have burgers once again there. It was in 2010, I believe, they converted it into Johnny Rockets, and to be honest with you, it looked nice, but it wasn't necessarily one of the more popular venues in the park.
Yeah. So, Aero 360, the park's thrilling pendulum ride, is back with a fresh coat of paint and some revamped controls and so on. Meanwhile, the 100-year-old Wacky Wheel has undergone a complete transformation. And that's not all. The Lost Kennywood gift shop, famous for sweet treats and park souvenirs, is also getting a makeover. Which one of these are you most excited for?
Oh, it's got to be the candy. Yeah. No, I'm. Let's put it this way: Aero 360 is a great ride to look at my age. It's not necessarily one I want to necessarily hop on board. I've ridden it. It's not for me, but I know a lot of young fans out there love it, and I'm glad to see it's been refurbished and it's coming back for this year. It became kind of an iconic ride for the park too because of the big arrows on it. I'm also very excited to going to do to the Kitty Ferris wheel, the Wacky Wheel, as they call it, because that is 100 years old this year, also, along with the Kitty Carousel, and they were the beginnings of what would become Kittyland at Kennywood, although they were located over near, where the paratrooper used to be in the park. If those are people who are familiar with it, it was like located near the current Carousel Pavilion, and they decided to move when they tore down the old Racer roller coaster, which sat where the auto race is today. They decided to move the Kittyland over there and build it right there between the auto race and the dance hall, and that's 1927 was when Kittyland, as we know it today, began as well. So two of the original rides, the Ferris wheel and the carousel, are still part of that Kittyland. They also have a Mangle's Whip, Kitty Whip, which is a similar model to the one that they had when they formed the Kittyland in 1927. Unfortunately, that ride, the original ride, was lost in a fire in 1975, and they replaced it with one from Paragon Park after that park closed.
So, Dave, Kennywood, they just announced Steel Curtain will be closed in 2024 while they work with the manufacturer and a third party to increase the ride's reliability. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's disappointing, obviously. I mean, I think everybody's disappointed with today's news that it will not operate for the 2024 season. But I'm also not totally surprised because I know they've been having some major issues with the ride. It was closed for more than half of last season, and without getting into details, S&S is coming in to re-engineer the ride along with an outside engineering firm to help alleviate the problems that it was experiencing. And obviously, safety has to come first. They detected a problem, and they want to get it fixed. And I applaud Kennywood for putting safety first. It's disappointing, yes, but let's hope that 2025 will be the year that the steel curtain comes back, roaring back, and that it's here to stay. Then we really hope that whatever problems that the coaster has been experiencing since it opened go away, and that they can finally get this thing fixed and put to rest and bring back the wonderful ride experience that it truly is.
Very cool. So let's talk about your involvement with the American Coaster Enthusiasts.
Okay. I've been a member since 1980, as I mentioned earlier. I found out about it with the ACE convention at Kennywood, and I've been a member ever since. And back in the late 90s, I was actually on there. That was actually the early 90s. I was working with on the membership committee, and I was the person that was answering the letters for people that were that were wanting to find out about ACE when they sent it to the PO box. So they would send all the inquiries to me, and then I would write back to them with a letter and application and a brochure explaining all that ACE was about. And I'd like to think that I helped grow the club back in that period. Then in 2000, early 2000s, I was asked to be part of the regional rep team here in Pittsburgh. And then and I'm still an assistant regional rep here for the region. And then in 2016, President Mark Cole at the time asked me to be historian for the club. And I thought about it, and I said, I appreciate the offer, but I really think that there's other individuals out there that know more than I do. And I politely turned it down. Well, 2 years later, he ran for re-election and won. And Mark was this time really insistent that he wanted me to be the historian. So I thought about it, and I finally accepted. And so I became a historian in 2008. And then I've been a historian since, and it's been an interesting experience. I mean, I learned a lot about different roller coasters, different manufacturers, histories of amusement parks. I've always been interested in that, and especially history of amusement parks, because I actually wrote a book on Kennywood back in 2004. And I've also written 2 more books since, on one on Jogga Lake, and the other I helped to write a book on Holiday World last year, so or 2 years ago. And so I've always been interested in history, and so that being part of what I do for ACE is I would write articles from time to time of historical natures for parks long gone or those that are still with us, and give their history about it. And of course, the most important part of being a historian now is the ACE roller coaster landmark plaques that we have been giving out to parks and roller coasters since 2002. And my predecessor, Richard Munch, who was also the founder of one of the founders of ACE, he created the landmark award, and I'm just carrying on his legacy as historian. And so far, I believe we have 48 currently that have been designated, and there will be 3 more this year. I can tell you that.
Let's talk about, in that role as an historian and, the landmarks and that to get out there. But what kind of goes into determining, what warrants that status?
Obviously, age, uniqueness, and how much of it is inspired or helped to create, like it helped to create a trend in the industry. One of the such is like Magnum XL 200. It was the first hyper coaster to be built, and that one deservedly got its landmark plaque. Batman the Ride is another one. Those are modern coasters that are getting landmark plaques because they started innovative trends in the industry that truly became like staples in the industry with roller coasters. But we also want to look at some of the oldest coasters out there. I mean, Leap the Dips, I believe, was the very first one that we awarded back in 2002. And it, obviously it was the oldest roller coaster in the world and the last remaining figure 8 roller coaster. It obviously deserved its landmark plaque. But then other coasters, different parks around the country, and now we're branching out more internationally. We are recognized, some of the obvious ones, like the 3 roller coasters at Kennywood, the wooden coasters at Kennywood, all received their landmark plaques back in the early 2010s. But then we also, we recognize the Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland, although we have not presented a plaque to Disneyland yet because they're unwilling to display it at the moment. But otherwise, every other park has been more than receptive to show the plaques that we create for them. And they can vary in range. I mean, we've done the kiddie coaster at Ride Playland received that. I mean, they don't have to be big record-breaking roller coasters to be an award recipient. Kiddie coaster being the oldest wooden kiddie coaster in operation in the world, and that's why we had to give it a landmark plaque, and various other reasons. I mean, we go because we look at how much of an impact they had on the region, or in history itself for roller coasters. There's various factors that we look at.
Yeah, very cool. I mean, so when we're talking about the history of Ace and so on, yeah, you really kind of made a splash more, as a historian, but also as a regional rep. So let's talk about your role as a regional rep. Like, what kind of functions do you serve? Like, what if somebody wants to join Ace? Like, do they contact you, or how does that work?
You can. I mean, I'd be more than happy to point you to the right people. The best way to find out about ACE obviously is online at www.aceonline.org, and click on the membership tab at the top, and it'll tell you exactly how you become a member. You can do it right online, which is so much easier than us mailing stuff out like we did 30 years ago. So you can become a member that very day. But I became an assistant regional rep in my region back in the early part of the 2000. I think it was like 99 or 2000. Became an assistant regional rep, and I was in charge of registration for our region. I did all the name badges and collected all the money and everything when we had a regional event. I recently retired from that position about 2 years ago. So, but I still help with planning of events. I do a lot of historical activities during like our KennyCon. Like we'll do a scavenger hunt, or sometimes we've offered tours or we'll just do what our region is known for is ITOTs, which is informal takeover times, and we'll always include the historical rides. And I'll be around to try to explain some of the history to some of the historic rides that we're riding, to those especially that don't know the story about them, or new to the region or ACE, or those who are just interested in the history of it. I'm always happy to parlay my knowledge with some of the more historic rides at the park.
Dave, ACE celebrated its 45th anniversary last year. The club's still strong, 46 years. What do you think it is about ACE that has allowed it to be as strong as it is this deep into its history?
I think it's, well, let's face it, it's roller coasters are what bring us together. But what keeps us together, I think, or the fact that you make so many friends while you're in the organization. When you go to different events and you start talking to one another while you're standing in line, or you're sitting at in a presentation or something, and everybody gets together and you make friends for life. I've made so many friends in ACE over the last 40 years. Excuse me. And I think that's the key. And I think people just have a camaraderie that they want to share with each other. And it's always fun to travel with the same people every year to the different events. And you may only see each other once a year at a convention or a conference or something of that nature. And of course, ACE also has excellent publications, especially Roller Coaster Magazine, which is published 4 times a year, and it's a full color magazine with some gorgeous shots of roller coasters throughout it. And it's filled with a lot of great information too.
Yeah. So obviously, you've got your history with ACE, and Kennywood appears to be one of your fortes. But outside of Kennywood, what's your favorite roller coaster?
Well, you guys will like this. I love the Beast.
Yeah, sweet.
Kings Island is one of my favorite theme parks. It really is. And I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you guys. We go every summer, and it's like one of my favorite parks. I also enjoyed like Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, and Cedar Point, obviously. I am so sorry. No, I bet we also like to do the modern theme parks too. We love to go to Disney World, Disneyland, and Knott's Berry Farm. I mean, there's hardly a park I've never not enjoyed myself at a park. I even go to some of these smaller, like tiny amusement parks, and a lot of people don't know that exist, like Memphis Kiddie Park in Cleveland, and you can have a fantastic time at that. I mean, you just let yourself go. Just enjoy where you're at. Doesn't always have to be the biggest, fastest thrill rides. I just find myself I just lose myself in an amusement park, and that's what it's all about, in my opinion. It's like your cares melt away, and you're just worried about what ride you're going to ride next, and how much is the corn dog. It's like you forget about your everyday strife, everyday problems, and I just find you're almost immersed in a fantasy world on when you enter the gates of an amusement park or a theme park. And I think that helps. That's my stress reliever. I mean, that's why I enjoy it so much.
And Dave, in today's world that we live in, a lot of the enthusiasts, they're seeking the biggest, the fastest, thrills out there. They're disappointed if a park doesn't have a giga. But let's talk about a park
Yeah, what
at,
happened
the
with
older parks like Camden Park. Yeah, Camden Park. So let's talk about a place like that. Why is it important for, if you're interested in this industry, to not always just focus on the latest, the newest toy out there, but also spend time visiting a park like Camden Park?
Camden Park, I think, is a wonderful little park. It's a little rough around the edges in terms of how it looks, but they obviously are trying to make the park safe. I mean, they don't want no park wants an accident, obviously. So no matter what people think, it's like, oh, that looks unsafe. I beg to differ. They are trying to make it safe. They just may not have a coat of paint on something, but Camden Park is a delightful little park. They got a great dark ride. They have the Big Dipper roller coaster. It's a much better ride than it looks. First off, it's very smooth, and secondly, it's a little more thrilling than it looks. And then their Little Dipper roller coaster is another example of it's the last of its kind. These were types of rides that were around all over the place. There was hundreds of them around the country, and this is the last one of itself remaining. So it was a production model ride that everybody had, and now they're the only ones that have one left. It's a great little park. I highly recommend it.
So when we talk about, let's ask this question, because this seems relevant. Because if you want the best say flight sampler of all the different roller coasters that are available from a modern standpoint, usually Cedar Point comes to mind. They've got one of everything essentially.
Yeah, they do.
What's your favorite Cedar Point ride?
The train.
Good answer.
I love the train at Cedar Point, the Cedar Point Lake Erie Railroad. It is fabulous. I mean, I love the smell of the coal burning engine that they have. I mean, it just I could sit on there all day. However, they do have a good selection of roller coasters too. So I do get off the train, but I love Millennium Force. That probably is my favorite at the park. The Blue Streak is another favorite because I'm a wood coaster aficionado. I just love wooden roller coasters, and the Blue Streak is a great one. Some of the newer rides like Gatekeeper and Valraven, I think, are fun too. Steel Vengeance, a lot of people love it. I find it a little bit too aggressive. So it depends on what you're looking for, I know younger people tend to like the more aggressive rides. I'm finding myself that the more aggressive rides tend to be not my favorite rides anymore. They may be great rides, they may be top 10 rides, but I like to get on rides that I like to ride over and over again. Perfect example would be Adventure Express at Kings Island. I love that coaster. So much fun.
We all love that coaster.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you. When people ask me what my favorite ride is at Cedar Point, I'll mention the train too. I mean, it's just really enjoyable, relaxing, and like you said, the smell and everything like that. Dave, you're going to be going to the spring conference at Kings Island that ACE will have there. I've been to several events that over the years that ACE has had at Kings Island. They always, no matter where it is, not just at Kings Island, but ACE always does a fantastic job with events. But what are you most looking forward to at the spring conference?
Outside of all the great coasters that they have, I just enjoy going for for the events, obviously to meet all my friends that I may not have seen in a year, but also all the great behind the scenes tours that events like that have, and you'll be catching me on a lot of those behind the scenes tours. Looking behind the curtain, so to speak. I love that kind of stuff. So right. I am looking forward to that.
So Dave, let's say that somebody listened to this podcast, that's just to wrap things up, and they wanted to know, how do I become a member of the American Coaster Enthusiast so I can go to all these events and know all these cool factoids like you? Where's the best place to find that information?
on the website, www.aceonline.org. That's the best place to find about ACE. You can learn about a lot of our like the different coaster awards that we've given out, especially the landmark awards. You can learn more about the club. You can learn about the different events that we have, and it's the best place to go. I'd also recommend looking it up on the Facebook page too, because they're putting a lot of more information on the Facebook page now too, as well, and other social media sites.
Perfect.
Yeah, Dave, switching gears a little bit here, you and I are not just about the amusement theme park industry. We're also sports fans. Your Pittsburgh Penguins, your Pittsburgh Penguins did not make the playoffs. Time to break up the band.
Oh, that's a loaded question. I think it's time to get more youth involved. Yes, I mean we need to get that. I hate to lose any of the three old timers, especially Crosby. But it may be time. I mean, I think they could probably get a nice trade for Malkin. As much as I'd hate to trade him off, but yeah, I think it might be time.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, thanks again, Dave, for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed this. I enjoy listening to your podcast too, by the way.
Awesome.
I enjoy tire topics as well, because I am a huge Kings Island fan, so I do listen to that as much as well. So
yeah,
I appreciate all that you guys have done so much with the information that you provide. So
it's our pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, Dave, we'll see you in a few weeks there at the spring conference.
I'm looking forward to it, Don. Thanks.